In this tutorial, we will try to look at how to deploy an OVA file. OVA files are the virtual appliance file. So let's suppose you have created a virtual machine in one of the Esxi server and you want to deploy the same VM into multiple Esxi server or a copy of the same Esxi server as a separate VMs. Like you want to have same Ubuntu machines multiple times for multiple purpose, then you can create a OVA out of that and you can deploy a OVA file. So we will look later into how to create a OVA file. That is also very simple with just one click. But in this tutorial, we will try to look at how to deploy the OVA. Before we go ahead and see how to deploy that, first I will try to show you how you can open the Esxi server. So you remember we have installed the Esxi server and we got the IP address assigned. Now there are three ways, actually there might be more ways, but three ways which I mostly prefer to do. And first way is from the browser. There is a catch here. In the browser, if you open with Chrome or Microsoft Edge, this does not work. It only works in Internet Explorer as of now, and I never had a success opening in Chrome or Edge. Whenever you open that, you will always get some certificate error. So if you want to open the console or the GUI of the Esxi server using browser, stick to Internet Explorer. So here is my Internet Explorer and I will just type in my IP address, https 210.1.210. This is the IP address which I have assigned to my Esxi, and just wait. Then you enter the username and password which you have set up and click on login. The virtual machines, if you click on virtual machines, it will list out all the virtual machines you have listed. Right now I don't have any virtual machines. The storage and network tabs are self-explanatory. In this I have a storage of 458 GB and it will tell you what is the file type, file system type, capacity, SSD, non-SSD and everything. And in networking also it will show you the virtual switch. You can go and explore the other options here. In the host machine, if you click here, it will have couple of options and you can see here get vCenter server that is having a separate license. Then create a virtual machines, you can do that. Shut down this host, shut down the entire Esxi, reboot. Then if you go to manage, if you have a license, if you are using a trial version, then you have to enter a license. Click on the licensing tab and the very first option would be license. You can enter the license there. So that's one way from the GUI, and this is the recommended way for using it. There's another thing called as VMware Vsphere Client. Remember the keyword client, Vsphere Client. Now Vsphere Client is deprecated and no more available, but you see here the VMware Vsphere is no more available starting with Vsphere 6.5. However, if you're using the older version, you can use the Vsphere Client and there is a list for that. So you can use this and try to download the Vsphere Client. I already downloaded a Vsphere Client and I opened it. Even though my VMware Esxi is 6.5, I downloaded this and it worked, but it says it will not work starting with 6.5, but somehow it works, but it's not reliable. So you go here, VMware Vsphere, enter the IP address, enter root and the password, whatever you have set up the password. Okay, so here if you click on file, there is something called as deploy OVF template. So if you want to deploy a OVF, the OVA needs to be present on your local machine. This is my Windows machine. In the Windows machine, the OVA needs to be there. I have this OVA custom built Linux operating system, so I have a OVA for this. So I'll press on browse, I go to the location, select, open, and I can deploy it. I don't want to deploy from Esxi, but I'm just showing you Esxi. I wanted to go through the browser method because that's the way, this is the way it's being recommended. So that's one, browser is one way. Then VMware Vsphere Client, remember the client, Vsphere is a Esxi, Vsphere Esxi, and then there is a vCenter. So we are talking about Vsphere Client. This is just a capability to connect to the server. The server is running in a separate hardware. Then if you have a VMware Workstation, then with the workstation you can connect to the server, and you give the server the Esxi server IP address 210.210.1.210 followed by username and the password. I already accessed it and I saved the password. So now this is the one. Now if you see here, I can access the VM, but I cannot do many of the things because I have a VMware Workstation. If I would have VMware Workstation Professional, then I would be able to do more operations like deployment and those kind of things, but some of the options are missing here. So I will not use VMware Workstation, because if someone is using Esxi server, they may not necessarily have the VMware Workstation license because they might feel it's a duplicate. So you remember, VMware Workstation is a desktop based virtualization software, but it has extra capability to connect to your remote Esxi server. However, you can still use VMware Workstations for your local machine. So I have a local virtual machines already running here. It's in a bad state now, but if I could double click, I should be able to run it and use it. See, it's saying it's in use. Now 210 and 1.220 210, this is my Esxi. So I will again not go through this because there are several ways to use the same thing, and I think Esxi or VMware people, they have messed it up. They have given multiple interface to connect to the Esxi server, and most of them does not work properly. Frankly speaking, that's my expectation. Even though Esxi is a great virtualization hardware software, but the client interface like Vsphere Client, it's full of gotchas, in the sense like you connect, sometimes it gets disconnected, sometimes it will error out, it will give you a error with respect to certificate. And the same thing, even if you're connecting from the browser, it does not connect with the client like Chrome, or does not connect with your Microsoft Edge. It only connects with with my Internet Explorer. So that's again a problem, but we'll have to leave it anyway. So let's not go into the deficiencies of that. We will use this standard way. Now here I have a virtual machine. I don't have any virtual machine. If you say create or register a VM, you will see this. If you want to create a fresh VM, there is no OVA or OVF template for you. You can go ahead and create a fresh virtual machine, which we have already seen, or I can show you again, but it's just, you have to click and process, follow the orders, and it will be same as whatever we did in VMware Workstation. Same, almost same. Here in this tutorial, we will deploy from the OVA. OVA file I have already generated. In next tutorial, for the time being, you assume that there is already OVA. I'll show you how to create a OVA. That would be very simple. So deploy OVA, click on next, then name of the virtual machine, my custom Linux, because this custom Linux is based out of CentOS, but it is not exactly CentOS. So that's why I created it for my own purpose. And you have to drag and drop the file here. So what you can do is go to the desktop, wherever you have the OVA file. I have the OVA file, and I select next. Then it will say where exactly to store. Data store 1 is the default. I'll say next. Then it will say thick or thin. Thin means if the OVA is of 50 GB, and if it is just using 10 GB as of now, it will just use 10 GB, and as and when it requires more space, it will take the space from my Esxi server. Thick means if it is 50 GB from the Esxi data store 1, it will right away take away 50 GB of disk space. So we want thin. In terms of networking, it's a VM network, simple. And then I can just go ahead and say finish. What it will do is, from my local machine, which is Windows 10, this is Windows 10, it will take this image, it will export to the Esxi server, to the data store, expand it, and do everything. So what is OVA? OVA in a nutshell contains your configuration and your disk space. How do we look what is inside the OVA? It's very simple. So this is the OVA I have shown you. I just made a copy of Linux OVA just because it's already being used, so I don't want to tamper. So I just made a copy of that OVA into a tarball, and I don't want to do it again because I already had it. So now this is my tarball. OVA is nothing but tarball, and you untar it, tar xvf linux.tar, and what it will do is it will create certain files. This is your disk image, this is the certificate file, this is the manifest, and this is the OVF. Remember, OVF, not OVA. So the entire package is called as OVA. Inside the OVA it contains OVF, which is a configuration. This is the manifest, certificate, and this is the actual disk, which is taking most of your space. Now if you open this file, vi.ovf, you will have the configuration, like what all the things, like how many processors it has, what is the amount of memory it has, and how many virtual CPUs you are giving, blah blah blah, everything, all the configurations you kept as part of creation of the VM would be here. That's why OVAs are so good, because you don't have to have any extra headache. If you have created a OVA from virtual machine at one place, you generate a OVA, keep it on your repository, desktop, anywhere, and just you can deploy it onto a multiple ESXi server. So you can just go ahead and deploy it onto a ESXi server. Once the deployment is done, so deployment is still going on, it's running at 28%. This would be active, and I should be able to boot my image and should be able to use it. So I will show you once the image boots up, and if you want, you can just look at the console also what is happening, but right now it's still deploying. Once the deployment is done, then there might be an installation from the OS perspective. The OS might have extra installations, like installations of the package or installations of the ISO inside the OVA. That might be secondary step, but I would say let's wait for the deployment to complete. See, it says failed to power on the virtual machine. Custom OS, the attempted operation cannot be performed in the current state, powered off. It is powered off because this is still going on. Once this is 100% done, you should be able to power it on. So I'll pause the video and come back when the deployment is done. Then we can boot the image and quickly see what is there in the image.